Support provided by Walters, Papillon, Thomas Cullins, LLC, specializing in business litigation and personal injury cases for over 40 years.
I want to thank you for the opportunity to be here today. It's great to be home. It's great to see so many familiar faces in the audience. The district we represent goes from north of Baton Rouge all the way down to the coast in Terrebonne Parish, and there are 750,000 people that are in this congressional district. And so weeks like this when we're home, we try and get around and go talk to as many people as possible. But I will say it's just awesome being home. The more I can be out of D.C., the better. But talking about D.C., Alex Bregman led the Astros to a World Series win with a bat that was made right here in Baton Rouge. We also had the LIGO facility over in Livingston Parish that effectively confirmed Einstein's theory on gravitational waves. The first time ever in the world the gravitational waves were actually measured, and again confirming Einstein's theory right here, Livingston Parish. Pretty amazing. And so you're often around DC, and keep in mind you have all 50 states and territories represented, and you have members of Congress all the time, coming up to you, hey, how are things going? Y'all Southerners, rednecks, whatever. And I'm like, yep, we just won the World Series and proved Einstein's theories. Nobel Prize in physics, and what are you rednecks up to? So it's in New York City, but it's awesome just seeing such great folks contribute so much to the world right here at home. But I want to start with some update on some positive things. I know that the construction on the interstate right now is frustrating, but you know what? It's a sign of progress. It's a sign of good news. TomTom just came out and said we have the 13th worst traffic in the United States and the 106th worst traffic in the world. Our metropolis of Baton Rouge, Louisiana, population approximately 230,000 people. We have the 13th worst traffic in the United States and the 106th worst in the world. It's amazing. But what's happening right now is we're seeing progress. Right now, from the bridge over to the 10-12 split, you're seeing construction. You're seeing progress being made, all with federal funds, I want to make note. You're seeing right now progress being made from Highland Road over to 73, which is the Prairieville Dutchtown exit on I-10, with federal funds. We started a mega grant program, and we ended up getting one of the largest grants in the United States because we added an amendment that helped this area compete a little bit better. And so we got one of the largest grants in the nation. We're on a trajectory right now to where the Washington Street exit, that whole place where the interstate funnels down to one lane, the only place in the United States. The only place in the United States. I love being the only place that discovered gravitational waves. I don't like being the only place where the interstate funnels down to one lane. But that's going to be fixed. And we're still going to provide access to that region of the city. And so a win-win there. But we're not stopping there. We're continuing to work. We got $500 million in additional transportation funds for the state of Louisiana and the grant as well. So we're continuing to make progress on transportation and traffic issues. And we've got a lot of work that we need to do. And Mike talked about the flood. And look, every person in this room, you either flooded or you know someone who did. And I'm sure that every single person in this room in some way helped out, whether it's financial resources, you went and gutted homes, you rescued, you prayed for people. Everybody helped out in this community because it's how we are. I just met with John Bridgers from the Cajun Navy today. Awesome man who just brought this great group of hospitality, generosity together and did an amazing job rescuing people here, and then did an incredible job in Texas to where the President of the United States honored John Bridgers at the State of the Union and had him back at the White House just a few weeks ago. Because that's who we are. It's awesome to see. But you know what? The flood was devastating, and the recovery is going to be continue to be going on for years because it was huge challenges. So far, we've been able to bring in about $8 billion in federal funds for the recovery, helping to rebuild our community and not rebuild it the same way. Rebuild it smarter, rebuild it stronger. And a little known fact is that in about the last year, we've actually brought down, not just on flood rebuilding, we've been able to bring home approximately 1.1, 1.2, maybe even 1.3 billion dollars in federal funds to make sure that we address the fundamental flood vulnerabilities in this region, in South Louisiana. And so projects like the Comeet River that have been around for decades, 30 years without making progress, designed to improve flood protection in East Baton Rouge, in Livingston and Ascension parishes, I think we're going to make an announcement later this year that says the project is fully funded. I don't mean next increment, fully funded. Period. Done. Moving on to the next one. So look, I know we have a lot of challenges and we have a lot of frustrations, but you know what? The Washington Street exit has been one of those things that's been plaguing our traffic problems for decades. You know what? It's being fixed right now. It's being fixed. The Comite project, we're on a trajectory to fully fund it. We're making progress there, but we've got much more progress to make. Let me bounce up to the national level for just a minute. You know, look, there are lots of frustrations about what's happening in Washington. I'm going to talk about that for a minute. But I want to focus again on positive issues. In about the last year, about 2.4, 2.5 million new jobs have been created. Just last month, 313,000 new jobs. We have an 18-year low on women's unemployment. The level for unemployment for women is at an 18-year low right now, and the lowest levels ever for Hispanic and for African Americans. A 50-year low in jobless claim rates. We've seen $8 trillion in value in the stock market created in about the last year. So progress is being made, and we're seeing things happening at the national level that are beneficial to all of us. 6 million Americans are seeing higher wages or bonuses in their paychecks right now. But we still have much more to do, and things in Washington are still incredibly frustrating and broken. Just last week, the last vote that we took, or one of the last votes we took, was a bill that did this. And think about this for just a minute. The bill was introduced at about 7:30 or 8 p.m. on Thursday night. It was over 2,200 pages, and it spent $1.3 trillion, and I'm going to say that again, $1.3 trillion. The vote on it was at noon the next day. I stayed up to about 3:30, 3:45 in the morning and plowed through as much of it as I could. I did read most of the bill. But tactics like that, how in the world can I come here this very next week, and I thought about this, standing in these venues of accountability and saying, yeah, that was a great vote, I voted for it, because I read it all and it was great. I mean, I can't, where's Chris? I can't spend $130 in 16 hours without permission from my wife, and we spent $1.3 trillion in excess of 2,200 pages of text in 16 hours or so. It's outrageous. It really is. It's outrageous to see those types of tactics still happening in Washington. The president at one point talked about vetoing it, and I really wish he had done it. But much frustration there on those types of tactics in D.C. Another issue that we're working on right now, and another source of contention and much frustration. Right here in Louisiana, our health care premiums have gone up about 140%, and I think for next year you're going to see another big spike in health insurance premiums. And it's outrageous, because at the same time our premiums are going up, our deductibles are going up as well. And so all these solutions that people are talking about, Republicans and Democrats, are often focused on, how are we going to design a health insurance or health care program that's going to cover these costs? I think it's a fundamentally flawed strategy, and here's why. Right now in the United States, we spend 17.5%, maybe even 18% of our GDP on healthcare. The average for industrialized countries is much closer to about 11%. We spend twice as much money on pharmaceuticals as the average country, twice as much. Not enough is being done looking at how are we going to bring down prices. Instead of trying to design a program that covers costs that are exorbitant, how do we design programs that actually bring down costs to more reasonable levels? And then design programs to cover those costs and help us to cover healthcare, to help us to make healthcare available for all Americans. And so we're trying to redefine this debate, because I'll tell you, healthcare, it is frustrating and it is exorbitant, it is unaffordable. But I think that the strategies, the cures that have been promoted largely ignore the fact that our costs are excessive, and we have remedies we can be pushing, and we have been working on those to bring costs down. And so that's going to be a big topic for this year, and I think as soon as you get your bills for your 2019 or see how much you're going to be paying for 2019 health insurance, I think that this nation is going to be outraged, and you're going to see much focus and frustration on that topic. And it's something we've got to work on. Something else that's on the front burner is guns and gun violence. And I know it's a hot topic, and I know that many people in this room have very strong feelings on one side or the other. But I want to talk a little bit about some of the things we've been doing, and I want to talk about some of the things we'll be working on moving forward. Number one, you can look at what happened in the Parkland High School shooting, and I had the opportunity to meet with the students from there. You can look at what happened in the Sutherland Springs church shooting in Texas. You can look at what happened in the San Bernardino shooting, in the Pulse nightclub shooting, and many, many others. There were multiple failures, and that we missed the opportunity to identify the threat. In some cases, like in Sutherland Springs, Texas, the law enforcement system simply didn't communicate. That murderer shouldn't have had access to a gun. He shouldn't have. And our NICS system, our background check system, failed. In the Parkland High School shooting, how in the world did someone who the cops had been called on, and different numbers, so give me some leeway here, I think I read at least 36 times. You had students in the high school, students that I met with and spoke to, who said, we knew he was going to be a shooter. How in the world can somebody like that slip through the cracks? That's not okay. So we just passed legislation that is signed into law today that does improve the NICS background check system, that does better integration of different law enforcement sources. But we can't stop there. Secondly, we provided substantial dollars available for grants to help improve the security and law enforcement resources at our children's schools. And that's an important step forward. The Department of Justice is working right now on banning bump stocks and other devices that perhaps circumvent the illegal nature of automatic weapons. And I want to be clear, automatic weapons are illegal. There are ways you can get access to them by getting the right class license after much more robust applications and vetting, but they're illegal. And if you have devices that circumvent that, then you need to apply for the right type of license. So that's being fixed. And look, there are other things we can be doing and other solutions that have been put out there. What we've got to make sure we focus on is that we're focused on things that truly do reduce the violence and senseless deaths. And so I want to ask you all a question. How many of you, when you were in school, when you were in preschool, in grade school, in high school, how many of you had fences around your school? Had gates, had security guards? All right, we got a couple. When you graduate from high school, let's talk a little bit more about that. So, no. But think about that for just a minute. Look, we can sit here and we can harden our schools. We can put cops everywhere. We can sit here and ban all these weapons, and I want to make note. There are 300 million guns in the United States today. 300 million. So we can outlaw guns. You know what? Drugs are illegal. Are those gone? No, they're not. So we need to be real careful about enacting laws that aren't going to truly achieve our objective that I think every single one of us in this room share, in truly reducing gun violence and truly reducing or eliminating senseless deaths. Something has changed. The point about my question is this. Something has changed in our culture and our society, something fundamental. Why is it that these events are happening? If we just go in and harden our schools, these massive shootings and these awful acts of violence are going to move to restaurants, grocery stores, sporting events, and other things. So we can't ignore this fundamental change that we're seeing in our society and in our culture. And the reason I say it here is because I think that every single one of us has an obligation, has a responsibility to work toward addressing that fundamental problem in our community. That fundamental problem in our church community, in our school community, in our families, in our neighborhoods, all of us do. And look, there are associated problems or perhaps issues that are contributing to that. Things like mental health problems. In the Congress, for the first time, we actually finally have defined and provided resources to address this. You had general population and you had criminals. Folks with mental health problems don't fit in either category. They're in between, and it wasn't defined and there weren't resources there. We've provided resources and largely defined that world. Opioid addiction, which is amazing how much it transcends every aspect of race and socioeconomic and regional, geographical. It's incredible, the challenges that opioid addiction is causing in our community. And we have provided resources to help educate healthcare providers about better ways to prescribe, health insurers. We have provided resources for counseling and other types of remedies to address these issues. But once again, I think that this isn't a situation where government by itself needs to come in and solve these problems. I think it's something that all of us that every single one of us can help to address and help to resolve. I think it's really important that we do that. And moving on from there, I know I talked about transportation a little bit and traffic problems, and I talked about the Comate project and flooding. We're moving forward right now on a large-scale infrastructure project, infrastructure program. There's no doubt that in Louisiana and across the United States, we have underfunded infrastructure. There's no doubt. The traffic problems here, the loss of our coast, the flooding vulnerabilities, the hurricane vulnerabilities that we have, these are problems that are fundamental. If our roads are underwater, if our businesses are underwater, if our homes are underwater, these things aren't functional. It's one of those basic needs like shelter and food and clothing. And so we've got to address these. And yes, it's going to cost money to do that. But you know what? Right now in this area alone, we're spending almost $1,000 a year in extra gasoline payments because we're sitting around in traffic in inefficient transportation systems. We're pumping emissions out of our cars that's causing impacts to the environment and our community health. We've severely handicapped ourselves in terms of luring additional economic development projects here because people can't get their goods from A to B. We've jeopardized the health and safety because ambulances can't get through these traffics and getting folks to the hospital whenever their critical care is needed. We're paying these costs now. And rather than looking at every investment like Park, which some of them are, we can make principled investments and truly solve these problems. And just yesterday, our own Representative Steve Carter from this area had legislation that was killed in the House that would have provided for regional solutions, allowing for a regional solution for the 5 parishes to get together, to come up with solutions that could help to build a new bridge and address LA 1 on the west side, LA 30 Nicholson on this side, and many other traffic solutions that we need. So at the federal level, we're working on providing more resources, but I'll tell you something that I think is actually more important than that. It's improving the efficiency of the project delivery and development process. When I worked for the state of Louisiana, we were building water resource projects, restoring the coast and building levees. You know that over and over again, we were able to build the projects that the Corps of Engineers designed or developed. We were able to build them for 1/2 to 1/3 the cost over and over and over again. If we can extrapolate those methods of success across our transportation projects and other types of projects, if we can improve the efficiency of these development delivery models, we can build twice as many projects or 3 times as many projects for the same amount of money, which means fundamentally changing the way that permits and regulatory challenges and other things are imposed on us to build these projects. Just the other day, we actually had to pass a law to say effectively that it was okay to send fresh water into an area, even though dolphins may be there, because this was going to help protect people. We have nearly $1 billion in the bank today. $1 billion simply trying to build a wetlands restoration project. The entire objective of the project is environmental, yet we had federal agencies telling us that they couldn't give us a permit for at least 6 years, and after 6 years they probably were going to tell us no because it had the potential to impact dolphins. Think about the potential to impact people, our economy. And so we have to pass a law to do that. Those types of hoops and hurdles are unacceptable. And so we're working on solutions to help improve the efficiency of the time and money it takes to deliver projects. And another example, it's amazing to me that we have an agency that is responsible for restoring wetlands, for building levees, for dredging our navigation canals, and they're in the Department of Defense. Department of Defense. Think for just a minute if the president came to you and said, hey look, I need you to develop this capability within the federal government to deliver these water resource projects and to restore wetlands. You know, yes sir, Mr. President, I'm gonna create this capability within our Department of Defense and we'll be right back to you. None of you would think that. You'd think, oh, what about Department of Transportation or Department of Interior or NOAA or EPA or other places that where you have more consistency with the mission. Look, I want Secretary Mattis, our Secretary of Defense, I want him focused on North Korea. I want him focused on Iran and Syria. I want him focused on Russia and China and our security here in the United States. I don't want him thinking about a wetlands permit that's stuck in a office somewhere in New Orleans. I don't want that to be his priority. But I do want this to be a priority for a cabinet secretary that truly cares about this because it's part of their agency's mission. And so we're looking at moving the Corps somewhere else where it's more compatible and makes sense to where that cabinet secretary can truly prioritize this mission area. We have a project in St. Charles and St. John Parish that was in the study phase for 42 years. 42 years. You're in business. If a client came to you with something and you said, yeah, you got it, be right, 42 years, we'll get it to you, and all will be good. How long are you going to be open? If representing you in the Congress, you came to me and asked for something, yeah, you bet, 42 years, you should throw me out. That's unacceptable, and we can't allow these types of inefficiencies to happen. They spent $80 million studying a project in Terrebonne Parish and haven't put a shovel in the ground yet. The area's flooded like 8 times since then. So these types of things, they're unacceptable. It's fleecing our nation. Look, in closing, and I want to turn to y'all's questions. In closing, I want to talk about perhaps the most important thing. I want to talk about divisiveness in the Congress and divisiveness in our nation. You can look at many things that have happened across this country. Whether you want to talk about many of the shootings that I discussed, the San Bernardino, the Pulse nightclub, the Parkland High School, Sandy Hook, the shooting at the church in North Carolina, Las Vegas, perhaps. We don't know all the details on that one yet. Or we can talk about what happened to our own Steve Scalise. My opinion, and many experts that I've spoken with share this view, my opinion is that much of the divisiveness that we're seeing in our nation today actually spawns that type of behavior. And look, I'm not saying that every single one of you in this room is going to respond that way, but some people do. Some people read these things, hear these things, and they get angry and they respond that way. And so I think that everyone in this room actually plays a role in solving this. And I want to be clear, I get it. I have a role in this as well, and perhaps a big one. And so in our office, we do things like virtually every bill we introduce, we make sure we have bipartisan co-sponsors on them before we introduce them, because we want to show we can work together with people. Quite frankly, I think you look at our record of legislative success, it shows that strategy is actually a more successful strategy for getting things done. We've been working on doing bipartisan town hall meetings with Republican and Democrat members of Congress in the same room, working together, talking together. We do unity lunches and meetings often where we don't publicize them, just bring diverse members of our community together for lunch or breakfast or just meetings, sitting around talking about issues that affect us. Because I think that's important. You know, political parties may now and then answer popular ends, but over time and change, they're going to become potent engines that cunning, ambitious, and unprincipled men and women are going to use to usurp the power of the people and to take over the reins of government for themselves. I'm going to say that again. Political parties may now and then advance popular ends, but over time and change, they're going to become potent engines whereby cunning, ambitious, and unprincipled men and women are going to usurp the power of the people and take over the reins of government for themselves. That was actually said by George Washington on September 17, 1796. Look, the district we represent, again, north of Baton Rouge down to the coast in Terrebonne Parish, 13 parishes. It's a conservative district, and I take very seriously the fact that my title is representative, and it's our job to represent those people, to represent the consensus views. And I understand that oftentimes everyone doesn't agree, doesn't share the same position, but we try and figure out what the consensus is or ways to redefine these policy issues to where we can get everyone on board, or as many people as possible. But this divisiveness that we're seeing right now in this nation, I think it is the greatest threat to our country. And just to confirm that, Russia's intervention in our election, what were their tactics? You know what their tactics were? What they were doing is they would go into different communities and they would try and create racial divide. They would go into different socioeconomic classes or income levels and try and create divide there. They would go into different regions of our country and try and sow regional divide. And you know what? They're playing us. We're responding to it. Look at the divisiveness in this country right now. So I'll say it again. I take very seriously the fact that I'm supposed to be representing the 750,000 people that live in South Louisiana in the parishes that we represent. But you know what? Every single one of us, whether your comments on social media, the way you respond to colleagues and family members, got it? No, I'm kidding. It all plays a role because all this snowballs. And we can disagree with one another, and we can have different ideas on how to get to the end zone. But we don't necessarily have to be disagreeable. We don't need to let Russia play us and sow this divide in our nation that's pulling us apart, because I truly believe that our bond as Americans, our bond as Louisianians, our bond as Baton Rougeans, it's much stronger than anything that pulls us apart. And this trajectory that we're on, it truly does undermine our nation. It's not about political parties, it's about people. And so I hope you all keep that in mind. I hope you share your ideas with us on how we can do a better job representing you, representing South Louisiana, addressing the priorities, eliminating impediments, making things more efficient. We do things like this. We do open office hours. We do town hall meetings. We do Facebook Lives. We do Grubs with Garrett, where we buy you breakfast or lunch. First 10 people to email in. And because I recognize that I don't have the answer to everything. And your input and role in participating in our representative form of government is important. So with that, I'd love to take any questions that y'all have. Yes, sir.
Congressman, first of all, I just want to say, I love it.
I don't think you're on.
How about if I just speak up?
There we go.
I love you, and I thank you for everything you do.
Thank you.
I may not speak for everybody here, but you're my guy.
Thanks.
Would you please speak to the elephant in the room, if you will, that is the national debt?
Yeah.
All right? I mean, I think the country basically is insolvent, and, you know, nobody is doing anything about it.
Thank you. Tom, so first of all, he asked about the national debt. He called it the elephant in the room. And so quick statistic, the national debt today is somewhere around $21 trillion. If that bill were due, every family in this country would owe about $165,000. Every man, woman, and child in this country would owe somewhere around $60,000. I'll be honest with you, Chris and I couldn't afford that. And I'm guessing other people in this room couldn't either. Look, I will be the first to tell you that I was hopeful that we would have made more progress thus far than we've made. But you know, one of the great things I think about where we are and some of the things that are on the horizon, some of the things we're doing right now on a very small scale, we're working on some anti-poverty issues right now. We have, by some measure, about 92 different anti-poverty programs, and we spend almost $1 trillion a year on those. Yet, we have more people in poverty today than we did 8, 10, 20 years ago. So we're spending extraordinary dollars, and we're not seeing the benefits. So look, let's be clear on that. That is not benefiting the people that are impoverished, and it's not benefiting the people that are paying for it. So right now, you've seen people talk about the open checkbook. They have something called OpenGov that is an effort that Ohio did, and we have been working with those folks on very narrow basis right now. We're trying to basically take, can I borrow this? Just take the power of things like this and using metrics to demonstrate the success or inefficiency of various government programs attempting to achieve different objectives. Look, the reality is, in the Congress, whenever you come up with a good idea, and we say, okay, well look, we've got a better way to build a project. They're gonna implement that new way, but you know what? They're not gonna get rid of the old one. So we have these legacy programs that have been around since 1950, 60, 70 that are redundant, and some of the other ones are much less efficient. So what we're doing is we're going into very small programs right now, using some of these metrics and helping to identify which programs are actually providing a return on investment and actually benefiting the public and taxpayers and achieving or advancing a public objective, and which ones are just fleecing this country, like spending 42 years studying a project or $80 million in Terrebonne without putting a shovel in the ground. And so what I'm really excited about is, look, this isn't partisan, this isn't liberal or conservative or anything else. It's data. It's black and white data that says this one provides a return on investment, and here's a more efficient way of achieving this objective, rather than letting people get into these partisan fights. So we're doing it on a small scale now. We're going to continue to move forward and do it on a larger scale. But I'll tell you, the trajectory we're on right now, amazing statistic. By about 2021, 2022, we're going to spend more money just paying the interest on our national debt than we'll spend on all of our Department of Defense operations around the world. Just the interest, not a penny on principal. unsustainable trajectory, and what we're doing is we are completely punishing our kids. Yes, ma'am. Oh, I'm sorry, excuse me.
Yeah, and mine's on the same line. Tom's. You said earlier in your speech, you couldn't spend money, $135,000 without asking your wife. I'm not upset that you're not, you know, the budget that you got 11 hours to wait to vote on. Well, why is there an uproar that continues to happen in the Republican Party? And number two, what happened to the word no? We cannot afford it. You just said it. We cannot afford to give our grandkids. So when are you, I mean, Kennedy was not happy, but why don't you stand up and say, listen, and Democrats have their spending preferences and you guys have your spending preferences. The answer is no on both sides. So when is somebody going to stand up there and say, we can't afford this, and you know what? Because I know I know this, everybody does this. You're probably going to have to tell your children one day you can't buy them a Porsche.
I won't ever have to tell them that.
We don't do it at the federal level, we don't do it at the state level, we don't do it at the local level.
Yeah. So number one, I should have clarified that I did vote no. And that's the third time. 3 years I've been in Congress, it's the third time that's happened. I voted no on all of them. It's not the way to govern. I can't stand here in front of you and explain or defend it, and I'm not going to try to. Number one. Number two, we actually did in the House. The government is, the discretionary spending is broken up into 12 different appropriations bills. We got in such an outroar in the House last year, early last year, because they tried this same thing, and it passed again, and I voted no again. And so we demanded that our Appropriations Committee take all 12 of the individual appropriations bills and pass them through the House. Hadn't been done in like 10 years. We did it. We did our job. We passed all 12 appropriations bills. We passed them through the House. They were all subject to amendment and votes and everything else. The Senate did not touch a single one of them. And that is why we were in this situation where backs against the wall, up against a government shutdown, and this mega appropriations bill was put together. It is, I'll say it again, it's not the way to govern. And in regard to outrage, if we could have filmed some of these closed-door meetings that we had last year, whenever people were yelling and screaming about what had happened last year, and said, we are not going to let this happen again, we are going to prevent this from happening, you're going to do your job, Appropriations Committee, and I'll tell you, to their credit, they did it. There's a congressman out of Georgia, Tom Graves, and he was one of the leaders pushing the committee to get this done. And so they did it. We did it in the House, and I'm not going to sit here and totally blame the Senate, but it's the Senate's fault. And I'll tell you, on top of that, we have passed 425 other bills that are all sitting before the United States Senate right now that aren't acting at all. And Mike mentioned earlier, this duplication of benefits issue. Many people who experience flooding might have taken a loan or even approved for a loan from the SBA. And so whenever Restore Louisiana got their $1.7 billion in federal funds, you were prohibited from getting a grant because you were approved for a loan. Now, I'm not a banker, but there's something that is not duplicative about a loan and a grant. Those two things are very different. You have to pay a loan back. So we passed legislation through the House to fix that, and the Senate is likewise holding that up right now. But yes, sir.
Garrett, can you answer a simple question for me? When is Steve Scalise going to replace Paul Ryan?
That's an excellent question. You'll be the first to know. Yeah.
Hi, Representative Graves. I'm a student at LSU studying the coast and coastal land loss, and I was talking to someone at the Governor's Office of Coastal Affairs, and he's the policy director, Charles Ecklup, and he said they have to sometimes turn away help from environmental groups because of how partisan the environment's gotten, and that's hard in Louisiana, especially because regardless of Democrat or Republican, our coast is disappearing. How do we depoliticize the environment to save our own land in Louisiana?
Yeah, Sarah, it's a good question, and I think the coastal issues in our state are one of the most pervasive challenges we have facing us moving forward. And I used to work with Charles, hired him. He's a fantastic guy. So look, the coastal issue, some people view it as an environmental issue, and I'll tell you, I was guilty of that several years ago. I viewed it as a birds and fish problem, a habitat problem. Shortly before Hurricane Katrina, I realized that was not the case, and I think Hurricane Katrina woke up a lot of people. because of our coastal land loss, we've lost 2,000 square miles in the state of Louisiana. That's the state of Rhode Island gone. That's the state of Delaware, with the exception of the waterways, gone. The reason Arkansas doesn't care when a hurricane comes is because they have a buffer. It's Louisiana. Our buffer's gone. And so Hurricane Katrina caused devastation in southeast Louisiana and caused the death of 1,500 people. So this isn't a birds and fish problem. This is a people problem. It's an economic problem. It's an endangered species problem. It's a historic preservation problem. It's one of the most pervasive problems affecting our state. The trajectory right now, based on a Blum and Roberts study done by some former LSU professors, show that the coast of Louisiana is going to be an Ascension Parish by 2100. Now, if you like to go fishing, you're like, oh, that's great, cuts my drive in, half. But let's be honest, that's a disaster. It is. And so, look, much progress has been made. We pulled together about $24 billion in federal, state, local, private, not-for-profit dollars. We have one of the largest coastal sustainability programs in the world going on right now in South Louisiana. When I was working there, we got death threats for some of our initial plans. We were able to work through with people and explain what was going on. We ended up getting them unanimously approved by the Louisiana legislature. We had Lisa Jackson, who was Obama's EPA appointee, oil and gas companies and environmental groups all endorse this plan. And so there are people that try and make the coast partisan. It doesn't have to be, because it affects people. And it doesn't matter race, socioeconomic, geographical, it affects people. And what's happening in Louisiana is actually an opportunity for us to develop policies, engineering, and science solutions that can be exported around the world. What's a tens of billions of dollar problem here is a trillions of dollar problem around the world. Water Institute of the Gulf and the Water Campus downtown, that place has the opportunity to be the center of excellence for the world on how to do this right. And so we are pumping additional dollars. We introduced legislation, became law in 2015, provides about $80 to $100 million a year in coastal restoration funding. The President Obama and President Trump both tried to cut our offshore energy revenue sharing somewhere between about 120 and 180 million a year. This year, we finally were able to convince this White House, after they tried to cut it last year, we brought them down here, showed them around. We got them to keep the funds intact, and now they're working with us to increase them. So, look, we've got a lot of work to do. We've got a lot of educating to do of other people. But we're making progress, and this really shouldn't be a partisan issue, and we shouldn't let people devolve it to that. So, thank you very much.
Support provided by Walters, Papillon, Thomas Cullens, LLC, specializing in business litigation and personal injury cases for over 40 years.